it's definitely f***ed. I Footdrag the water too hard. I gotta limp this baby home.
Welcome back, friends and fellow paramotor pilots. Today I want to share with you guys a story of how I experienced a very unique engine failure, one I've never had before, and how it could have led to me going down in what's sometimes referred to as New Jersey's Bermuda Triangle. Before we get into this episode is brought to you by yours truly, sponsored by Risky Biscuits Co. If you want to get a sweet t-shirt like this one, or if you need a brand new ozone glider, reserve, harness, or propeller, check out the first link in the description. If you're in the market for a wing, feel free to email me at info@tuckergott.com and I'll help you out with any advice on ozone products. So let's get into it. Let's set the scene. This was one of those nights that the weather was just absolutely perfect. And I didn't have any intent of filming a YouTube video, but I flipped on my GoPro just in case something exciting happened, and it did. I was really feeling the vibe this night. I had my AirPods in, I had some good music queued up. I took off, I was playing around with my speed bar, hooking around some trees, and the plan was to make our way to Round Valley Reservoir. Now, Round Valley Reservoir is a reservoir I've flown around many times. In an old episode, we did a fly camping mission here. And every time I fly around it, although I've never witnessed anything peculiar, I always have in the back of my mind the weird urban legends surrounding this reservoir. According to the internet, Round Valley is 180 feet deep. It's surrounded by some weird mountains, which apparently affect weird weather patterns. And since its construction in 1971, 26 people have drowned, and 6 of them have never been found. This is why it's sometimes referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of New Jersey. And interestingly also, there's apparently a sunken ghost town at the bottom of this reservoir because it used to be a valley that was flooded. As I approached the reservoir, I realized that there was absolutely no wind and the water was glassy smooth. So I swooped down and started a water foot drag. Now, when you're doing a water foot drag, there's various different ways to do it with your foot positioning. You can do toe up with your foot in front of you, which is what I normally do because it results in the least amount of splash that can potentially hit your propeller. The other way to do it is kind of toe back behind you. And you might think that this is better, but it actually disturbs the water more and throws more water onto your prop. So that's the method I avoid. This night, I just started foot dragging the water, toe out in front of me. My vans are nice and smooth. They glide right over the top of the water. I was on my 14-meter free ride 2, which is a super fast wing, so I had a lot of speed. I felt like I was just water skiing this reservoir. My crucial error here is I was feeling it a little bit too much, and I just kept foot dragging and foot dragging and foot dragging for a long time. According to my rough calculations, I probably foot drug somewhere around 4 miles worth of water. And this is where I went wrong. Normally, I don't keep my foot on the water for that long. I'll come down and touch a little bit and then I'll disappear. But this night, the air was so perfect. I had my music on. The water's really shallow all around the edges. So I didn't feel like there was that much risk dragging my foot in the shallow water. Now, somewhere around halfway around the circumference of the reservoir and probably around 3 miles worth of water foot dragging, I started to realize that my engine sounded a little bit different. And in reality, my engine was sounding different, but the tone was changing over the course of time, which resulted in me not really noticing it at first. When I started to notice it, I kind of convinced myself that it was just in my head, everything was fine. But looking back in the clip, you can definitely hear that something doesn't sound right. So around the time I crossed paths with my buddy Robbie, we made eye contact, we were feeling super cool. I decided to pull away from the water, and when I hit the power to climb, I realized that I had an insane reduction in power. I had basically just enough power to have a shallow climb. This is when I realized that sound I was hearing was definitely something significant, and I had to head back to the LZ immediately. The crazy thing was, I could squeeze the throttle to full power, and I felt like my engine was making full RPM, but the thrust was just not there. I was also kind of scared to hold it all the way wide open because I knew something was wrong with my propeller. So I wanted to be careful not to do any more damage. So in this moment, I decided to just start a very shallow climb and start thinking about where I'm gonna go if my engine were to fail. or more specifically, my propeller were to fail. In this case, I had the shoreline that I could bail into. It would be a rocky landing, but I'd probably be okay. It'd be a massive hike out, but this is all I had to work with.
I gotta limp this baby home. God damn it.
I kept that shallow climb going, and at some point I had to make a crossing over the water, so I kept in mind if I were to lose all power, I could always glide to the shore.
Dude, my prop is it's making no power. You can hear it has a different tone. I do want to maintain a solid altitude here and always like be ready to bail into a field or a parking lot. I also like don't want to rev my engine too high and try to squeeze all the power out of it because I don't know what the additional drag of this thing going on and overheat my motor and blow it up or something.
Once I made it past the reservoir, I had a few more obstacles to clear, a highway to fly over, completely milking this engine with just enough altitude to give myself time to land out. At this point, I had a good idea of what had happened. I figured I destroyed my propeller by blasting it with 4 miles worth of water spray. And I was able to confirm that because I milked it all the way back to the park, killed my motor as soon as I got close enough, swooped in for a landing, and took a look at the propeller.
I foot drug the water too hard and I think my prop delaminated.
That's crazy, like, oh! It's obviously like delaminated, but it reduces to like no power. The crazy thing about this, and the reason I wanted to share this video with you guys, is because I was very surprised how little damage there was to the propeller, but how big of a result it made in my lack of thrust. That disruption in airflow at the very tip of the propeller, the last 2 inches that's going super duper fast, was enough to kill probably about 40% of my power. Having just about 60% remaining was just enough for me to climb out and avoid going into the Bermuda Triangle of New Jersey. I was pretty surprised by this, but luckily, and also not luckily, the same thing had recently happened to my buddy Dan, so I had it in the back of my mind that it was something that was possible, and luckily Dan had some super glue from recently repairing his propeller. We were able to make a super janky field repair. I used Dan's super glue to piece my propeller back together. I feel like it barely cured, and then I took off again to see if it worked. Lucky for me, it did work, and I was able to accomplish my second goal of the night, which was diving the quarry. I flew out to the quarry, and all night the winds were perfect, but right when I got to the quarry, the winds had picked up, making it a little bit turbulent, but I was full commit at this point with my super glue repaired propeller, my rap music in my earbuds. I was determined to send it down the quarry, so I did. I did 3 dives into the quarry. The air was definitely super turbulent and sketchy at this point, but I had the time of my life and I decided to turn around and head home full speed bar to make it back to the park and land just before sunset. Although my super glue repair held up, I immediately went home and ordered a brand new E-prop 140 centimeter to replace my old one, and this time I will keep in mind that I need to put some prop tape on it and I need to not mistreat it and foot drag water for 4 miles. I love E-props so much, I had to switch back to another propeller I had on hand that wasn't an E-prop, and it's all right, it works, but I miss my E-prop. The reason I love E-props is because they're super light and they spool really fast. They give you better throttle response. So my new E-prop should be arriving very soon. If you've never tried an E-prop, here's a shameless plug. I sell E-props 2 and 3 blade 130s for the standard Moster 185 268 reduction on my web store, and I can order any other E-prop you need for any other propeller. This was a spontaneous short story. I'm glad I didn't go down in the water because I'm a pretty bad swimmer, and that would be unfortunate if I was number 7 to go missing and never found at the reservoir. All's well that ends well, I suppose. Hope you guys enjoyed this story. Until the next one, have fun, fly safe, peace.